This episode goes out to Johnny from Detroit, Michigan.
Hi there, Megan Robinson here. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast. Hey, guess what? Today, April 7th, 2019, Garrett is doing an AMA on the fantasy subreddit. Now listen, just between you, me, and the microphone, I don't totally know what a subreddit is. I didn't even know that AMA stood for Ask Me Anything until Garrett told me. But Garrett is super excited about it, and he would love it if you showed up. It's also a big help if you let other people know about the AMA. It's happening at reddit.com/r/fantasy. Your support would mean the world to him. He's a little nervous, but again, that's a secret. Don't tell anyone. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today you're getting chapters 18 and 19 of Nightblade, where Lauren has just parted from a mysterious man named Jordell. Enjoy!
Nightblade, Chapter 18. Lauren's heart fluttered. Damaris, too, had taken a room at the Wormwing. Were they in league? She supposed not, for then the man in the red cloak would have had Lauren's description. It did not matter. She had no desire to seek the place out, and now she stood in much the same straits as when Corin had released her. She had to find Annis, and still had little idea where to look. She turned her feet south and east again, making her way as best she could through the city's alleys. Now she observed the beggars with a wary eye, avoiding them where she could. When she had to pass one, she sank a hand into her cloak and placed it on the dagger. Whether they saw a threat in the gesture or for some other reason, she always passed unmolested. Soon the alleys grew sparse, the streets more plentiful, and the difference between them diminished. Before long, Lauren found herself walking on crowded avenues covered with more filth than she had found even in the alleys. This must be the area Annis spoke of, she thought. But when she found a wide square to gain some sense of direction, still she could not see the city wall. If anything, she felt more lost than when she began her search. If I walked in Annis's shoes, what would I do? As a child used to wealth and raised into plenty, she might try to find an inn. Then again, she might find no inn to meet her standards. She might shed her wealthy clothing for beggar's rags to blend in, but then again she might find such rags too louse-ridden and threadbare. In truth, Lauren knew little of what Annis might do. How could she know the mind of a girl brought up into wealth and privilege? Other than fleeing their families, they had nothing in common. Lauren felt a nagging in the back of her mind. She was attracting curious looks again. In this district, her fine cloak stood out like a crow in a blue sky. Whatever course she decided on, it had to be better than standing here looking lost. She chose a direction and struck out, walking as though with purpose. Though the streets might be overrun with the poor and the unfortunate, they were nearly empty of constables. She saw only one, leaning against a wall to whisper in the ear of a woman whose skirt rode high. Lauren looked hastily away. Even she knew the purpose of such a conversation as that. She did not bother to hide her face as she passed, and the constable's eyes never diverted from their goal. Long and longer she wandered, up and down streets, into squares and alleys, until the sun drew behind the tops of the taller buildings. Lauren watched it with mounting anxiety. She did not desire to wander these streets come sundown. That meant she must find an inn for the night. But how could she know which one to choose, one where she might still live come morning? She could not help but think that Annis would know what to do. When her stomach growled again in protest, she stopped at a tavern to order a stew. Above the door hung a sign that showed a princess dancing with a boar. Letters were scrawled beneath it. An old and stooped man passed, and Lauren seized his arm before pointing up at the sign. "Grandfather, how does the sign read?" He barely glanced at it before pursing his lips. "I never learned my letters neither, but I know its name. The Princess Pig." Inside, she paid extra to keep the bowl and wooden spoon, and she carried the stew with her into the street. She did not wish to pause her search when Annis might wander by at any moment. She had neared the end of the bowl when a street urchin passed, massive eyes imploring her from a gaunt face. The boy did not look older than 10 summers. "Have you any to spare, please?" he said in a tiny voice. He rubbed the back of a hand across his swarthy forehead, which only served to smear dirt across it. Lauren's appetite vanished. The stew had grown cool anyway. "Here, keep the bowl. You can use it to collect alms." The boy's eyes, impossibly wide already, grew even larger. "Oh, mercy, my lady," he gasped. "Thank you, thank you." Before Lauren could stop him, he lunged forwards and wrapped her in a hug. The poor child's head scarcely reached her chest, and his arms felt like thin wooden rods as they pressed into her back. "That is enough," Lauren said, trying to sound gruff. "Be off with you before I take it back." The boy nodded vigorously and turned to scamper away. Lauren could not stop a small smile as she turned away from him. But then some instinct seized her. Something was odd. Different. Lauren slammed a hand against her hip to find her coin purse gone. A pair of frayed strings hung from her belt. She whirled to see the boy's tiny form retreating between a tavern and a tanner's shop next door. "Stop!" she cried. The boy turned for the space of a blink. He smiled with his tongue poking through his lips, and then he turned and sprinted away. "Does no one in this city keep their thieving hands to themselves?" cried Lauren, and chased after him. She rounded the corner so fast she nearly skidded to a fall. Only luck stopped her, letting her bounce off the wall instead and keep running. The boy fled like a rabbit, any trace of frailty or weakness gone. His bare, filthy feet pounded across the stones. He spun once as he ran, flinging the empty bowl at Lauren. She barely got a hand up in time, and the bowl cracked off her forearm. This boy was fast, but years of hunting with Chet, running for hours through the forest to reach the best grounds, had given Lauren an endurance unmatched by any in her village. Every time he reached the gap between two buildings and dodged through, Lauren seemed to have gained a little ground. The boy noticed as well, for his occasional looks over his shoulder slowly took on an air of fear. Her blood boiled. How dare this boy steal from her? She was the Nightblade. He soon changed tack, using size to his advantage. He found narrow gaps in wooden fences and stone walls and leaped through like a rabbit. But the boy could find nothing too narrow for Lauren. Though she sometimes paused to preserve her bow, always she made up the distance in the next long sprint from building to building. As she drew nearer, Lauren felt a grin spread across her face. "You run a pretty race, little rabbit, but this wolf will catch you." The boy answered by increasing his pace. He diverted course suddenly, running straight for a wall that had a tall wooden gutter affixed to it. He seized the gutter in his hands, propped his feet against it, and shimmied up like a bear cub climbing a sapling. On the nearer wall, the building had 2 rows of windows with wooden sills. Lauren leaped for the first windowsill. Her fingers gripped its wooden texture as easily as a tree branch, and she vaulted up to seize the next one. She pulled hard and pushed up with her feet, leaping to seize the shingle roof with her fingertips before hauling herself up. The roof sloped gently upward. She ran up and reached the peak just as the boy scaled it. He barely had time to look up in surprise before Lauren took him in a flying tackle, slamming him hard into the shingles. The boy cried out, more from fear than pain, and tried to squirm away beneath her. But Lauren wrapped one arm around his torso and used it to flip him face down. She caught his neck in the crook of her elbow. "You would do well to stop," she growled in his ear. "There was no better wrestler than I in my village." The boy went tense and still below her, panting heavily. Then the fight left him all at once, and he went limp. "Now," said Lauren, "where is my purse?" The boy said nothing, but she spied a bit of brown cloth poking out from between his tightly curled fingers. She freed one hand and snatched it, trying to pry his fingers open. A bit of his spirit returned, and he gripped the purse more tightly. Lauren slammed his hand onto the shingles, and he cried out, letting go with a whimper. She snatched the purse and pushed up, rolling away to inspect her prize. The boy had cut the strings, which hung in frayed tatters. Still, they were long enough to retie around her belt, and she took a moment to do so. All the while, she kept a careful eye on the boy. As soon as she removed herself from him, he leaped up into a crouch, looking like a cornered rat. But as Lauren made no further move, gradually his narrowed eyes softened. Once she finished retying the purse, Lauren got to her feet. The boy recoiled, ready for a fight, but Lauren only dusted herself off and flapped her hands as if shooing a cat. "Go on, then. Off with you. Be gone." The boy studied her carefully. "You mean you do not want to fight?" Lauren scoffed. "Fight one such as you? I would break you in half, and for what? You are only a little boy, and the worst thief I have ever seen." The boy finally released his crouch, standing as tall as his diminutive frame would allow. "A bad thief? Never! I steal 1,001 purses each day, and never have I ever been caught, excepting only you, and there's nary a one better in Cabras when it comes to rooftops." He glanced at the gutter he had climbed and then eyed Lauren ruefully. "Well, excepting only you, I suppose." Lauren laughed at him. 1,001 purses every day? Then you must be the wealthiest man in the 9 lands. How could you even count them all? "I know my numbers better than a wizard," the boy boasted. "And my letters as well. I could have been a scholar if I had been born in a noble house, and a wiser man you would never have seen." Lauren rolled her eyes. She had never learned to read, and might have been impressed by his boasts if she had thought there might be even a crumb of truth to them. "Very well, Master Scholar. Or was it wizard? Or thief? Consider me honored to be in your presence. Now, remove yourself from mine before I give you a beating you will not soon forget." He scowled, trying to look fierce, but his dirt-brown face with its fawn's eyes only looked the more ridiculous. "Why do you withhold yourself? I can take it. I have grown up fighting, and many know to fear my fists. You are a stranger to this city, clearly, if you have never heard the tale." He raised his hands to demonstrate, waving them back and forth as though he might throw a punch. Lauren seized a wrist and used it to spin him around before she caught his feet with her ankle. She lowered him gently to the roof rather than letting him crash down, and then put a foot on his throat to hold him there. He lay there for a moment, blinking as though unsure quite what had happened. "Oh, I can see the strength of your fists most clearly. How could I have thought to challenge such a mighty warrior?" "I am mighty," he said, hitting her boot with his free fist. "I am Auntie's favorite. She always says so." "I do not know your aunt, but she seems a poor judge of fighting skill." Lauren let him go. "Not my aunt," said the boy, rising. He rolled his eyes as though she were an idiot. "Auntie. She runs us. Me and the children, I mean. At least until I am of age to take over, for as I have said, I am the most fearsome pickpocket in Cabras." His words drew Lauren's interest. "This auntie you speak of, you say she commands you? You and the other children?" The boy nodded emphatically. "The most feared thieves' guild in all the 9 lands." "And you all pickpockets? Cut purses?" He shook his head. "Only the smallest, like me. Everyone thinks we are too young to be a threat. The bigger boys, Auntie has them do the heavy work, steal from wagons, taverns, and inns, jobs of that sort." Lauren's pulse began to race, and an idea formed in her mind. The boy surely exaggerated, but she had heard tales of thieves' guilds from Bracken. The old man had said that gangs of pickpockets and burglars roamed the underbelly of every great city in the 9 lands. They knew the alleys better than anyone. Thieves delved into the cracks and corners and crevices that no one else dared explore. What better way to find Annis? And failing that, where better to begin her new life as Nightblade? She could not remain in Cabras by herself forever, but what if she had a dozen or more companions to help her stay hidden? Her mind made up, she drew up and placed her hands on her hips, eyes hardening as she fixed the boy with a stern glare. Despite his bravado, he quailed a bit. "Do you have a name, boy?" "Only the best," he said, lifting his chin. "Gem, they call me, for I am a jewel among dirt." "Well, Gem," said Lauren, "I think you had best take me to this auntie of yours." Nightblade, Chapter 19. Lauren had feared she might have to convince Gem, but he agreed to take her quite easily. Almost too easily, she thought. As Lauren followed him through the city streets, she kept one careful hand near her coin purse and the other near her dagger. She would not be made a fool of twice. But no danger presented itself. If anything, Jem took quite well to her, mayhap because she had not beaten him as he feared. Soon after they began their walk through the streets, he began to speak, and once he started, Lauren thought he might never stop. It reminded her of Annis, and she felt a twinge of sadness. "Auntie will quite like you, I am certain," said Jem. "You with your fine cloak and climbing, they are quite useful things, though you should not expect her to enjoy your eyes." Lauren looked at him askance. "My eyes?" "Green," said Jem, as though that were the only explanation needed. When Lauren looked at him without understanding, he sighed. "Folk remember green eyes. You do not want anyone to remember you." "No one remembers me," he said proudly. Lauren nearly gave that a snide answer, but decided to let it pass. Their path wound north and west, and for a moment she feared they aimed for the district where Corin had released her, but it was not long before Jem swerved suddenly left, ducking through a hole in a fence where a board had been removed. Lauren followed him to find a small yard floored by dirt and straw instead of cobblestones. It was empty save for the two of them, but a smell lingered on the air that told her this place had once held many pigs. The building attached to the yard lay empty, its back door fallen from iron hinges and lying on the ground. No one looked to have lived here for quite some time. "Where are we?" Lauren's nerves prickled at the possibility of a trap. "This is Auntie's place." Jem walked to the gaping back door, leaned his head in, and cried, "Fresh blood!" After a few silent breaths, Lauren heard the quiet pitter-patter of feet. Then they came. From every crack and corner, children poured like the sudden onset of a flood. Some spilled through gaps in the fence, others from the doorway and windows of the house. A few even climbed down off the roof. Soon dozens of children filled the yard, all more than a head shorter than Lauren, all small and starved-looking. Their wide eyes mirrored Jem's as he stared up at her. Hello?" Lauren thought she ought to be frightened, but she could see no threat in their wan eyes. "Which of you is Auntie?" "None of these," scoffed Jem. She is here." The voice came from the house. There in the door's frame stood a woman, and a true woman she was. Lauren immediately felt gawky and childish. Auntie wore a tunic with short sleeves that did not reach her elbows, over which she had donned a pale green vest that clung tightly to her supple frame. Her arms bore olive skin, with fine-fingered hands free from grime or calluses. Lauren curled her own fingers into her palms, for they felt suddenly peasant-like. Auntie's eyes captured her the most. They were of a light hazel, unremarkable in itself, but their intelligence dazzled the mind. They flitted back and forth, up and down, always assessing her surroundings, observing everything. Lauren suddenly felt underdressed. She grew even more self-conscious at the sight of Auntie's face, slender with high cheekbones, long entrancing eyelashes, and framed by hair cut short in a bob. Her hair was dyed so blonde as to be almost white, except near the scalp where it darkened towards black. Lauren had never seen anything like it, or like Auntie herself. "Well, do not gawk forever, girl, lest I think you wish to marry me." Lauren's eyes widened and quickly turned away, as her cheeks flushed full crimson. "My apologies, just Auntie. None of that lady nonsense. Ladies are who we steal from, and quite well, too." She lifted her hands to brush against the front of her vest, displaying its fine pattern. "It is how I gain such niceties and keep the children fed." Lauren did not know what to say, and so elected to remain silent. But Auntie spoke no further word, and Lauren realized that she bore the burden of introducing herself. She bowed low. "I am Lauren, of the family Nelda. I had hoped you might help me, and mayhap entertain my company, at least for a little while." "I hardly see how I could help you if I did not," said Auntie with a wry twist to her mouth. Presence is oft required for assistance, unless one is paid to go away. I know many a bard who plays worse than they are capable for just such a purpose. But come, tell me, what do you require? You seem a capable girl, and unless I miss my guess, you are well acquainted with that bow on your back, and may up the knives at your belt and in your boot." Lauren gave a little gasp and glanced down. Her cloak still kept the dagger hidden, and the knife in her boot remained invisible, for the leather was too thick to show a bulge. "It is the way you hold yourself." Auntie pushed off from the doorframe and came out into the yard. The children parted before her like water in a pool, even closing in behind her to complete the effect. Auntie walked in a slow half-circle to stand behind Lauren. She placed one gentle hand on Lauren's left wrist, the other on the right of her waist. "This hip juts out slightly. That might be a stance of rest, but this hand you hold a bit farther from your body than the other. It is ready to leap to the hip and draw forth the knife." She released Lauren and came around in front of her again. Lauren swallowed. "And the one in my boot?" Auntie smiled warmly. "I have never known a forester who did not carry a knife there. Those who wander the woods for long hours cannot keep their tools in drawers and cabinets like us city folk." The answer left Lauren with even more questions. How had Auntie known she came from the forest? She had to swallow again before she could continue. "As for your question, I seek a girl within the city. I thought you might—" "That the children and I would have eyes in all quarters and that we might help you find her?" finished Auntie. "Yes, that is as may be. And what of the other thing? You spoke of keeping company for a time." Lauren looked around her uneasily. The idea seemed suddenly ridiculous, surrounded by these children who had grown up lifting coins from unwary victims. "I thought, mayhap, you could use a willing hand, though now that I stand before you, I see you have many to spare." But Auntie stepped forwards and took Lauren's hands in her own, raising them to her chest. The smile she gave Lauren held such secret promise that Lauren felt utterly entranced. Willing hands are never in enough supply here, especially when attached to one who, unless I am mistaken, has traveled far and done much using them. I love my children after all, but sometimes a woman grown serves better. Lauren swallowed once more. "Does that mean you will have me? I will learn all you can teach, as quickly as I might. You will find me an excellent worker and a quick study." Auntie cut her off by drawing her hands away and letting Lauren's fall limp to her sides. A sad little smile dusted her lips. "Ah, that it were so simple. But, Lauren of the family Nelda, you must understand something. I am mother to these children in all but blood. My first duty is to them always. I hold myself the sole caretaker of their well-being." "Of course," said Lauren, looking at the urchins that surrounded them. "Then you know I cannot simply accept any person who offers to serve us. First you must prove that you will help the family and not make yourself a drain upon us." "I would never," said Lauren, shaking her head quickly. Again that small smile. "I believe you. But if belief were food, none of my little ones would ever go hungry again. And so I must beg a task of you, a small something to prove yourself, a token of faith, a proof of skill, and something to fill the bellies of my children." Lauren's heart raced and she smiled. "I think you mean to tell me that someone's purse sits over fat, and I must lighten it for them." Auntie grinned. "I knew you for a clever girl. Just so. And if you fetch this thing for me, you may consider yourself well, not my daughter, for you and I are near of age, but family nonetheless. My children and I will spare no trouble in helping you find your friend." Lauren could not remove her smile. An auspicious start indeed. Her first task as a thief, other than what she had stolen from her village. "Only point the way, and I will do as you ask." Auntie smiled. "I thought you might."
This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is E. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.